And so I explained, I don't need to meet your family because we're not that serious at this point.
And how did she react to that?
Okay, do you guys want to hear how I got stabbed or not? Let me just get to it.
Oh, yeah, I definitely want to hear it. Yeah.
Oh, Ben, there they are.
Greetings, gentlemen.
What?
Whoa! Benjamin Franklin!
Yeah. Yeah, Eli let me use the time machine. Cecil, you're having ice cream with him on Thursday.
Not cool, man. That's not cool.
Oh, come on. Think about all the things that Ben can teach us. He's the perfect guest for this week's episode about him.
Can't even eat ice cream.
Indeed I am. And of course, we shan't do anything while this one is present.
What, me? Why not me? What are you talking about?
I mean, he's clearly an Irishman. Look at the hair and the box.
Okay.
Oh, right. Yeah, I forgot. You're pretty racist.
Also, this one with the beard seems like he may have a touch of the octoroon in him. Have you tested his purity?
What did you just say? Okay. All right, you know what, Ben? Why don't we just do something fun, huh? We could podcast in a bit. How's that?
Okay, tell me, where is the nearest brothel? I'm feeling someone older tonight. Perhaps a 15-year-old?
Wow.
You know, I'm going to just send him back in the
that's
machine.
That seems like a good
Just
idea.
go ahead and send him back.
Yeah, just get rid of him.
And I'm
He's
Italian,
literally
just so
horrible.
you know.
My God, he admits it.
We
Okay.
should put the time machine back. Why do we have this? Hello and welcome to Citation Needed, the podcast where we choose a subject, read a single article about it on Wikipedia, and pretend we're experts. Because this is the internet, and that's how it works now. I'm Heath, and I'll be hosting this very special episode about one of our founding fathers. And I'm joined by a panel of experts who understand better than anyone else the greatness of America. Four white guys. Four white guys. Tom, Cecil, Noah, and Eli.
Okay. I am white enough for four white guys. For four white
sure,
guys.
yeah, yeah.
Very white guy.
No, but okay, but I'm so white, dude, that sometimes I yell at cops just so I can watch them not shoot.
Look, Heath, if I don't record my thoughts as an MP3, how will people know how important I am?
Podcasting's the white guyest thing. Wow. Right? Just keep doing it. All right, Noah. What founding father are we going to be talking about today?
Today, we're going to be talking about Benjamin Franklin.
All right. And why Benjamin Franklin?
Well, I can tell you why it isn't, right? So Ben Franklin is one of those weird individuals whose biography is only like a third of the way over by the time he turns 50. Though he'd already distinguished himself as a printer and a writer, he did the vast majority of his historically important shit that he was ever going to do after he turned 46, thus proving that even in late middle age, a person can still have a big enough impact on the world to earn a place on the $100 bill. So I definitely did not choose him as a subject because I'm turning 46 later this week. That is a coincidence. I picked him for like a nerdy history reason or like some Etruscan thing or something.
Boo.
All right, Noah, but you better bring it home with the French orgies in this last third of your life, okay,
even
bud?
imagine. I'm sorry, Eli. And look, I get that there are plenty of reasons to hate this so-called founding fathers in general and plenty of reasons to hate Ben Franklin in particular. He was viciously racist. He treated his wife like a servant. He treated his kids like a tyrant. He's the godfather of mansplaining. And though he did come around to an abolitionist position late in his life, he only did so after a lifetime of owning slaves. And
Yikes.
that's a really hard list to put a that being said after, but that being said, it's still somewhat like even knowing that it's kind of hard not to like the guy. Like
He was
the
doing
bullet
interesting
points.
interviews. He was just trying to be an interesting interview.
Well, okay, but so the bullet points of Ben Franklin's career are as impressive as any you will find anywhere in history, but his historical reputation is also so avuncular that he's the one founding father you can imagine asking you to pull his finger.
Fart proudly, Uncle Franklin. Fart proudly.
Exactly, right. So obviously we're going to go over all these points in details, but to give you an idea of what we're working with here, let me just read you the opening sentence of his article on Wikipedia. Quote, Benjamin Franklin was an American polymath who was active as a writer, scientist, inventor, statesman, diplomat, printer, publisher, and political philosopher, end quote. And I mean, that might not seem all that impressive in a world where every fourth person you meet is a producer, director, singer, songwriter, freelance hacker, greatest sword fighter in the world. So I need to emphasize that he made a historical impact on every one of those 8 fields.
Yawn. As you yourself have pointed out, Noah, it was a lot easier to invent shit and be an expert in things when nothing had yet been invented. And there were like 4 books total on any given subject.
Okay, no, fair.
I feel like everybody thinks they would have invented shit if they lived back. Like, oh, I would have invented fucking calculus if I was there before
Right, yeah.
Leibniz. No, you wouldn't have. No, you wouldn't have. Fuck you. And you would have invented calculus. That being said, I think I actually would have invented sliced bread. Like, if that was the thing, I would have sliced the shit out of some bread for sure.
Right. Now, the myth.
Fun fact,
of
not invented until 1928 in a serious mass
crazy.
way.
Right. Now, the myth of Ben Franklin is that of a self-made man, but that comes with a huge grain of salt. The dude started his life off in a 3-story house. And like, I mean, I guess for a guy who grew up in a 3-story house, he's as self-made as you can really get. But still, the 3-story house in question was on Milk Street in Boston, Massachusetts, and Ben was born in it in January of 1706 to Josiah and Abiah Franklin. By the time he was born, his father had 7 children by a previous marriage and 7 from the new one. So little Benny was his mom's 8th kid and his dad's 15th.
Jesus.
Yeah, they'd go on to have 2 more before they were done.
Does the second string wife make the kids that sit on the bench?
I guess, yeah. So Ben was better educated than the average kid in the American colonies at the time, but not by much.
Okay, and also more than the average colonial kid is a really low bar.
Yes.
Like what does that even mean? Like, he still thought goats were Satan's familiars, but he could read and write his last name. Big deal.
Honestly, like his failure to think that goats were Satan's familiars became a problem for him. So because his dad wanted him to enter the clergy, right? So he sent him to the Boston Latin School. But after a couple of years, it was super clear that he wasn't pastor material. And Josiah was damned if he was going to pay good money for an education that was going to go to something secular and useful. So Ben didn't graduate. Instead, he was apprenticed to his brother James at the age of 12 and learned the printing trade.
Joke's on Dad. Turns out later in life, Benny would be a lust savant.
No, he played totally platonic games of chess against women a third of his age while they were in the bathtub, Eli. Totally platonic. Anyway, a few years later, James Franklin started one of America's first independent newspapers, and little Benny desperately wanted to write for it. His brother said no. Now, history generally paints this as James being jealous of Ben's writing acumen, but what we know about James, we largely know from Ben. Of course, we know it about him because of Ben's writing acumen, so who's to fucking say? Anyway, the key is that his brother wouldn't let him write for the paper, so he crafts an alternate persona and starts sending in anonymous letters that James ends up printing anyway. And this alternate persona, a middle-aged widow named Silence Dogood, ends up being the talk of the town. Now, at the age of 17... Ben ran away from his apprenticeship and moved to Philadelphia. He would later portray this in a very Dickensian fashion, as though his brother was some kind of cruel slave driver and he had to take an underground railroad to get away. But one way or the other, in 1723, he showed up in Philly with nothing but a few dollars, an in-demand trade, a better-than-average education, and centuries' worth of family connections to call upon. After a few years of following get-rich schemes all the hell way to London and back, he settles down in Philly and gets a job with a printer.
Yeah, I mean, he could have tried waiting out his inheritance, you know? He just needed to wait for his father to die, and his sibling, and his other sibling, and his other sibling, then his other sibling, then his other sibling, then... Okay, yeah, he probably needed to get a job.
No, you got to get a job.
Yeah, would have helped, for sure.
No, it's at this point in his life where he really starts getting active in civic improvements. This includes, depending on who you ask, starting America's first library. Definitely includes hiring America's first librarian.
Excellent. Can you unpin your hair and shake it out for us? Very good. Yeah.
Yeah, well, probably.
Ooh, put
Keep
my
the glasses
spectacles
on.
Yeah.
Okay, now shush me. I'm being very loud.
So a few years later, he would organize America's first volunteer fire department. And a few years after that, he founded the American Philosophical Society. All 3 of the aforementioned organizations are still in operation more than 250 years later.
Oh, hang the fuck on. Up until now, there was nobody putting out fires?
No.
Like, this is what I mean by low bar for inventing stuff. Like, hey, we should put fires out. Oh, look at the big brain on old Ben over there.
Well, like you would try to put your own shit out if it counted up there. Maybe your neighbors would
It
come
was
up.
a very libertarian system.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Yep.
Dude, your house is on fire. Who's John Galt?
Now, along the way, he also got hold of a newspaper called the Pennsylvania Gazette, where he was finally able to really showcase his skills as a writer. And he had some mad skills as a writer, especially when it came to satire.
Guys, quick, Noah's sentence fell through a time warp to 1993. Save him.
Oh, it's
Save him.
gonna get even worse. One of the I have to tell you about this. This is amazing. One of the greatest flame wars in all of history was this ongoing exchange that Ben Franklin had with a rival printer who Franklin accused of being dead. Okay,
This is so good.
It went back and forth for so long because the dude never got the fucking joke, and he kept printing these belabored "I am too alive" and Ben Franklin's a son of a bitch responses, and Franklin would print something like, "Well, see, now my esteemed colleague would never stoop so low as to call me a son of a bitch. Further evidence that he was replaced by imposters long ago."
I'm washing your fence. Fuck you.
If you printed that today, 500 QAnon followers would show up outside the Pennsylvania Gazette headquarters and wait for FDR to reappear.
You sure would.
Now, over the same period, he wound up with a common law wife and an illegitimate son, no relation. His marriage to Deborah Reed was, as near as the historical record shows, loveless from pretty much the start. Their letters were kind of formal. He spent years away from her with only token indications that he missed her at all. And in an era where like having 17 children wasn't all that uncommon, their union produced only 2. One of whom died of smallpox by the age of 2. We actually don't know who mothered Franklin's other son, William, and neither did the kid.
Okay, it feels like you're saying the kid died of smallpox because mom and dad didn't love each other enough.
Okay, right. No, I see that.
All right,
That's
we
not-
can't know that for sure, Heath.
Okay.
We cannot know that for sure, but the wood cuttings of Franklin rubbing his kid all over like the poxy guy in town are definitely suggestive.
Jesus.
I was trying to get a lot of boring shit into one paragraph. Okay, so all of this gets us to 1733, which is when Franklin bursts onto the national stage. This is when he starts to publish what would be his most successful venture to date, Poor Richard's Almanac. So, like back in the pre-internet, pre-TV, pre-radio days, you kind of had to get an almanac every year, right? Somebody in your local area had to. It would tell you the moon phases and the tides, and apparently you need to know that shit when you're a farmer. It would tell you when the fuck Easter was going to be that year. It was sort of like the Google of its
And
day.
if you're playing Carmen Sandiego, you got to get the new one for the
Obviously, right, exactly. And Franklin's Almanac would end up
Love
being
that.
by far the most popular in the 13 colonies, right? You couldn't buy the British Almanac. It would be useless to you. So he wrote it as Poor Richard, a thoroughly middle-class and somewhat miserly guy who peppered the Almanac with moral parables and, more importantly, little aphorisms in the margins. These aphorisms are a great indication of just how dominant Ben Franklin could have been on Twitter. Many of them are still familiar to us today. A penny saved is a penny earned, which is a misquote of something he said. But anyway, early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise is his. 3 can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. Never leave that till tomorrow, which you can do today. Guests like fish begin to smell after 3 days.
I feel like bathing has helped that last one.
A little
Yeah.
bit, a little bit. But
I feel like
not,
he suggested murder with the secret one, right?
Yep, he did.
Saying
Yeah, absolutely.
Murder 2 people.
Wait, there's others. Nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. He came up with that one after Poor Richards. But lost time is never found again. That list could keep going on for the rest of the fucking essay. When asked to write an epitaph for a family friend's pet squirrel, he may very well have coined the term snug as a bug in a rug. He probably didn't, though. He probably actually stole that from an Irish playwright. Probably stole most of the other ones, too, honestly. So, like I said, he would crush it on Twitter.
The healthy, wealthy, and wise one is like, fuck you, man. If I ever get to be a millionaire, I am sleeping in. Eat shit,
Yeah.
Ben Franklin.
Well,
Fuck
so, interestingly enough, so did he.
yeah.
He ate shit.
No,
Ben Franklin, shit eater. Interesting. One of my
I don't know
favorite
that he
quotes-
didn't.
Yeah, I guess. Okay, maybe. My favorite quote from the almanac, his aphorisms, is "He that falls in love with himself will have no rivals. And like,
Yeah.
I got tricked by, I thought that was like I thought it was good. I thought,
Right.
I thought he was saying like no, you'll be all set if you fall in love. You got to love thyself, and then nobody will
can't
rival you.
lose. You will always win.
Looks out the window of the retirement home one day. Oh, it's like a it's like an ironic
Yeah,
thing.
it's like that at
That's
40.
fucking dark. God damn it.
So
be
another
there, Heath.
famous quote. So another famous quote that could be attributed to Franklin is, of course, "No step on Sneck." Right? He was the designer of the infamous "Don't tread on me" flag that remains popular with shitty people that suck even to this day.
sure
And
does.
shitty people that suck, by the way, they can find a lot to like in Franklin. Okay, he's the kind of patron saint of the bootstrap mentality. His writings are filled with musings about how lazy people will get if you have a robust social safety net for him. He was staunchly conservative, and he was very much a white supremacist. Like Rush Limbaugh talking points are far from the worst things that you'll find littered in his writings. He was also an early advocate of colonial unity. Long before the No Step on Sneck, he produced a different famous snake-based imprint that showed the various colonies as segments of a chopped-up snake over the caption "Join or Die."
How did he think snakes work? They're not Voltron, man.
Really confused by it.
Like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
You're backwards on this at the
yeah,
very least.
I
Yeah.
mean, like,
Yeah.
it was full before.
And
I
South
don't-
Carolina was the last one. That one didn't matter. Like, obviously, the ass
cut the
we
wrap
had
off.
a
That's fine.
spare
Take it or leave it.
Carolina. I don't know. The cloaca matters. Now, he was appointed Postmaster General to the colonies in 1737. As part of that job, and presumably to get away from his wife, he traveled the colonies way more extensively than most. He was also a key contributor to the Albany Congress's Plan of Union in 1754, which laid a lot of the groundwork for both the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution. In fact, his advocacy for colonial unity has led some people to call him the first American. Though, to be fair, the bootstrap bullshit and racism are probably better qualifiers for that title, but one way or the other.
He was also the first person to demand a T-shirt for finishing a big plate of ribs. So that's
That actually may be true, though. Okay. Anyway, by 1747, he'd amassed a pretty substantial fortune, so he backed away from his printer duties and started the process of transferring that business to a partner that would continue to pay him for like 2 decades after he retired. And so it was that well into his 40s, he retired from the job altogether and then went on to log another 4 lifetimes worth of achievements before checking out.
Okay. I can't decide if I hate him or love him. Like,
Right.
he's making the first library, but then he's like old-timey Ayn Rand, but then he's actually kind of like John Galt, like for real though, doing stuff. He's juking and jiving. But okay, but he's a slave owner, shitty racist. So I
Yeah,
hate him. I
that's
hate him is where I landed, but like first, he had some good stuff in there. All right, well, we'll see how it goes with the rest of Ben's life, with the old Ben's life. But first, a quick break for some apropos of nothing.
In addition, a man must earn by the sweat of his brow and nothing more, else he should become a layabout of the highest order.
Excuse me, Mr. Franklin, your breakfast is ready.
Oh, thank you, Slave Michael. Tell Slave Alice I shall be down to eat it shortly.
Oh, okay. Oh, wait, what are you writing there?
Oh, a treatise on how to be a self-made man. I worry for the spirit of this land, Slave Michael. I worry.
I bet. Hey, maybe I could read it when you're done. I taught myself to read at night after you fall asleep.
Maybe. I don't know. No offense, Michael, but I think this would be above your head. It's about gumption and chutzpah. It's not really your thing.
Sure. Yeah, I get it. Also, by the way, your brother sent another check for your column that you write in his paper, and your father wants to know if you'd be so kind as to dine with his friend that's in town. They have a job offer for you, apparently.
Oh, again? Fine.
Very good, Mr. Franklin.
Oh, and Slave Michael,
Yes, sir.
can you acquire me a kite and a key? I'd like to try to get struck by lightning.
I thought you'd never ask, sir.
And we're back. When we left off, Ben Franklin was a very confusing combination of like a Little League dad, but also with a Kant book, The Critique of Pure Reason, but also a musket. Nobody knew how to deal with him. It was very confusing.
Yep.
And he had just retired at age 46 from the printing business. What's next?
Okay. So obviously nobody invented or even discovered electricity. Fish can make that shit. And that was noted in the historical record as far back as 2750 BCE. And no, listener, I wanted it to be by the Etruscans too. It wasn't. It was the Egyptians. The first records of static electricity go back to 600 BCE to the also frustratingly non-Etruscan Thales of Miletus. Hell, by the time Franklin came along, we even had the Leyden jar, which was a device that would store a pretty substantial static charge. But to that point, electricity had mostly been used for things that ended in right? But Ben Franklin was among the first to look at lightning and go, I bet that's the same shit. And he was most likely the first person to prove it. And even if he wasn't the first, like the French guy who beat him to it was like basing his proof on Franklin's experiment.
Okay, I'm thinking about that Leyden jar. I'm trying to think of what a non-prank war reason to have a jar of electricity would be in 1747. I'm very happy to say that I can't think of a single non-prank war reason to have a jar of electricity.
A lot of fuck stuff you could. Okay, so I would.
You open it up and electric eels shoot out. It's just like.
So, but honestly, it would be hard to overstate Franklin's contribution to electrical research.
He's Thor the Thunder God. There, did it. Don't you feel stupid?
No, I don't. Franklin contributed way more to electrical research than Thor did. Anyway, there's obviously the famous Keanakite experiment that proved that lightning. So now, anyway, there's obviously the famous Keanakite experiment that proved lightning was made of the same shit that you get when you scoot your socks across a rug, which, by the way, he conducted at the spry young age of 46, which is still very young if you think about it. But there are several other foundational experiments that he did that laid the groundwork for later scientists. And to emphasize the importance of his contribution, I have another list of Franklin coinages for you. He was the first person to use battery to refer to an electrical storage device. He was the first person to use positive and negative to describe electrical charge. He invented the term electrical charge. He also coined the terms armature, condenser, conductor, discharge, electrician, and, in a perhaps telling finale, electric shock.
Yeah, up till then, orchestras had to call their boss arm wavy guy. It was the worst.
Those are different conductors, right? Like
he does not.
I do not know that, no.
Homophone.
So at the same time that his electricity experiences were making him an international celebrity, he was also hard at work inventing shit. His most famous invention, of course, is the lightning rod, and that's obviously an extension of his work with electricity, but it made for some super easy Prometheus comparisons in the worldwide media. He also famously invented bifocal lenses and, less famously, the first flexible urinary catheter.
Really? Okay, I just feel like somebody would have thought of that the minute we even considered putting in an inflexible urinary catheter.
You would think
somebody would be like, well, why don't we just not have it? What if we just flex that out?
Don't make a lot of assumptions, Heath. Remember, up until Franklin, every time there was a fire, they just shrugged and built a new house, I guess.
Yeah. No, they would buy up the land and burn them on purpose, as we learned last week. He also invented, by the way, the Franklin stove. I don't know that really matters much. People always mention it, though. And much to the chagrin of Ayn Rand and her ilk, he never patented any of his inventions, saying instead that, quote, "We should be glad of an opportunity to serve others by any invention of ours, and this we should do freely and generously," end quote. Franklin also did important scientific work studying why oil and water didn't mix, and I only bring that up for two reasons. One is that biographers love to seize on his experiments stilling the waves as an analogy to his later work as a diplomat, but the other is because it led to an amazing invention that I love so goddamn much. He made a cane with a hollow spot inside that he'd keep vegetable oil in it or something, and then when he would see a little inlet that was particularly perturbed, he could go up to it and he would say, "Calm yourselves in temperate waves," and he would smack it with his cane. And then he would hit the secret switch or whatever that opens the reservoir and freak everybody the fuck out.
Everyone's just politely clapping and he's like, "Oh, sure, but when Moses does it, it's a whole thing."
So by 1757, Franklin was by far the most famous person in America. He's America's best-selling author, its most revered scientist, and its wittiest satirist. He's also been active in Pennsylvania politics and civic groups for decades at this point. So when the Pennsylvania Assembly had to send somebody to England to settle a dispute with the colony's proprietors, Franklin was the logical choice. He would remain in London for the next 18 years on a mission that would morph from him trying to get the king to do something about the Penns to trying to stave off a war between the colonies and their mother country. He would, of course, fail on both counts and return to the colonies in 1775 on the eve of war.
Proving that before America was even America, failure would not be a deterrent to political success.
Not a lick. Now, I should note, by the way, during that 18-year stint, he only came home once, and it was really brief. What's more, his wife never so much as popped over to England to see him for a weekend. Now, obviously, popping over to England, a bit more of a commitment in the days before transcontinental flights, but still, 18 fucking years. She would die the year before he made it back, and after a long illness that he knew all about. Anyway, he took his son William with him on the trip, and eventually the British tried to gain a measure of control over Ben by making William Franklin the governor of New Jersey and then threatening to take that away if he pissed him off. What that actually ended up doing was creating a rift between the two that saw him fighting on opposite sides of a war, and that rift was never rectified.
Okay, you know all the garbage that sits for days in the streets in New York? Well, when that finally gets hauled away, you get to be governor of that. How's that?
Hey, that garbage is my backyard, sir. How dare you?
And it gets, believe it or not, it gets picked up every day. We just make that much more.
do make a lot of
every
garbage.
day. So by the time he got back to Philadelphia in 1775, the Revolutionary War had already started. The opening shots at Lexington and Concord were about 2 weeks old, and the Pennsylvania Assembly was called upon to name a delegate to the Second Continental Congress. They chose Franklin unanimously, so in June of the following year, he winds up on the committee tasked with drafting the Declaration of Independence.
I feel like Ben Franklin showed up to draft that and he was like, okay, so I write a satirical slam poem full of bon mot about how England is actually dead as a... No. It's not joking. We're just doing a real declaration right now.
Amazing.
We're just literally saying we're independent. We're not doing that.
Guys, am I Ben
You're the
Franklin?
worst.
I might be Ben Franklin.
It's entirely possible. Now, I should point out a misunderstanding here. A lot of people are under the impression that America was founded by a bunch of old, white, rich, racist, misogynistic, tax-evading slave owners, but in reality, some of them were quite young. Thomas Jefferson, for example, was only 33 years old when he signed the Declaration of Independence. Alexander Hamilton, all at 21, and he wasn't even the youngest. That honor goes to Virginia's sprightly representative, James Monroe, who was only 18 years old. Ben Franklin, though, was the oldest at 70. He was also disabled through a huge chunk of the proceedings by gout, so mostly he was attached to the endeavor because of the prestige of his name. That being said, he did ultimately play a key role in both the drafting of the Declaration and the part where they had to convince everybody to sign the damn thing. It's also a spot for another great coinage. This is where he's supposed to have said that everyone then must, quote, all hang together, or most assuredly, we shall all hang separately, end quote.
Nice.
Now, of course, the septuagenarian Franklin was far too old to serve any real purpose or travel great distances at this point, except no, the fuck he wasn't. So he became America's ambassador to France in December of 1776, and then he headed back across the Atlantic during wartime when the other guy's navy dominated that particular ocean and set about convincing the French to openly ally with America in their fight for independence. And along the way, he would add America's greatest diplomat to his growing list of superlatives.
Yeah, held that title until Robert Oppenheimer and become
Jesus
death.
Christ.
Oh, shit.
Remains the greatest we have.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, actually. Now, this was actually a pretty easy assignment in a sense, right? Because France fucking hated England. France had always hated England, and they wanted nothing more than to break up their American empire, especially the parts that butted up against their New Orleans claim. So, but on the other hand, of course, this war was being framed as a battle for independence and democracy, and the French aristocracy had some well-founded reasons to be terrified of that idea catching on worldwide. Franklin, though, was a darling of the Enlightenment, and his electricity experiments had made him an A-list celebrity in France.
Yeah, the French really got a charge out of him.
Didn't they, though? So
I'm embarrassed by that.
So he set about ingratiating himself with the who's who of Paris through unabashed hedonism. The letters that John Adams wrote about it are goddamn amazing, but it was successful hedonism, right? Well, in the sense that he got a lot of ass for a 70-year-old, but also in the sense that he ultimately convinced France to join the war effort and then helped broker the peace in Paris when the whole thing was over.
Monsieur Franklin, I was unsure of your cause until I saw just how much poon you were slaying. France's army is yours to command.
Well, isn't that very, very French, though?
We could actually use a loan, too. Any chance you like magic?
We do like magic.
With such dirty ears, perhaps we could get...
So Franklin would cross back over the Atlantic one more time in 1785 and enter the country he'd helped create for the first time. But in his absence, of course, the people in charge of things had fucked it all the way up with their Articles of Confederation. So in 1787, the now 81-year-old Franklin would head off to the Constitutional Convention of 1787 and play a key role in drafting that founding document as well. Now, granted, the key role he played was largely in hammering out the bullshit system where each state gets 2 senators, even if they have a smaller population than Milwaukee.
Boo, boo.
Right, yeah. But in his defense, what he wanted was a unicameral legislature that was as democratically elected as was possible at the time. He just recognized that nonsense was as close as he was going to get and hoped that we'd have gotten our shit together enough to fix it by now. Now, obviously, by the time the Constitutional Convention wrapped up, the now octogenarian statesman had contributed all that he had to offer to society, except his posthumously published autobiography, which he started writing in 1771 and continued to work on throughout his life, and which many regard as the first great work of American literature. He eventually got around to dying in 1790 at the age of 84, and by all accounts, he used his last words to be a smart-ass douchebag. His daughter, Sally, who was caring for him at the time, told him to roll over onto his side so he could breathe more easily. Franklin replied, quote, "A dying man can do nothing easy," end quote, and then died. Probably out of spite.
That's pretty funny.
I'm not rolling over. Fuck
Amazing.
you. I'm just going to die on my back. here.
Everything's a pain in the ass. I'm out.
Right? So approximately 20,000 people attended his funeral. Now, that's a big number, but it's all the bigger when you consider that this country had 4 million people in it then. That's like 1 out of every 200 Americans was at his funeral.
God damn.
Right? There were memorial services held for him around the world, and in France, the government declared 3 official days of mourning.
And if you had to summarize what you've learned in one sentence, what would it be?
I should have at least learned to fly a kite by now. I'm way behind.
All right, Noah, I will go first. Ben Franklin was a notable cad into his 70s, which he could do because, A, he never left for tomorrow who he could do for today.
I like it when you make it easy on me. It's A.
It is A. God, you guys are so good.
All right, no, let's go back to that snake that jumps into like one big snake. It's like pieces of a snake. What is the best name for a giant combining mecha snake?
I love it.
A, Bitey Morphin Power Rangers. B, Moltron. C, Anaphylactic Shockwave. Or D, Constricticons.
Oh,
just
shit.
because I want to say it with my own fucking mouth, it's got to be C, anaphylactic shockwave.
You are correct. Yes.
Brilliant.
Voltron's the best.
Yeah.
It's pretty goddamn good.
All right, Noah. Ben Franklin proved that we have a lot to learn from old people. What did today's generation of octogenarians have to teach us?
Oh, no.
A,
Cut this question.
how to watch daytime TV on purpose. B, how to sell your house for 9,000 times what you bought it for, but still be poor. C, how to glorify a pre-segregated America with a straight face. Or D, how to die of COVID.
Oh, shit.
Ageist.
Secret answer E, I don't want to say anything now.
That is absolutely correct. No, you're in.
Whatever.
I
I've seen our
nailed it.
listener numbers. They can't hear this podcast.
So I ran the table. So I would like an essay next week from Cecil.
All right. Well, for Tom, Noah, Eli, and Cecil, I'm Heath. Thanking you for hanging out with us today. We'll be back next week. And by then, Cecil will be an expert on something else. Between now and then, you can hear Tom and Cecil on Cognitive Dissonance, and you can hear Eli, Noah, and myself on God Awful Movies, The Scathing Atheist, The Skeptocrat, and D&D Minus. And sometimes Tom and Cecil on Skeptocrat, and it's so much fun too. And if you don't feel like buying our NFTs, you can make a per episode
There's no
donation
such
instead.
thing. We don't have
You just go to
NFTs.
patreon.com/citationpod. Or if you do want to do the NFT, just email heathandwright@gmail.com.
No.
And if you'd like to get in touch with us, listen to past episodes, connect with us on social media, or take a look at the show notes, check out citationpod.com.